Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting at the Major Applications Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Eddie Labour, the Committee Chairman. A warm welcome to those in the audience and also to those who will can see this on the Council's YouTube channel. The business of today is in the report that was published and consists of two items, both of which are in part one, both of which will be taken in public. I will work through speaking arrangements in a moment. Can I do apologies for absence first, please?
Apologies from Councillor Dillon, Councillor Oswald to substitute.
Can I have declarations of interest in matters coming before tonight's meeting? Councillor Curling.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A non-pecuniary declaration on item 6, as I'm a governor at Harefield Academy, and that has been cited as a possible alternative.
You are staying with us?
I am staying, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins?
Yeah, I will leave on item 6, as obviously I have involvement in this.
Thank you. The minutes of the meeting 12th of April are in your bundle. Can I take those as true and accurate?
Yeah.
Thank you. There are no matters raised in advance or as urgent, and as I said before, we are all in part one. Tonight's meeting is being filmed. The filming gets this end of the room and not the audience, but for those who are intending to speak, it will cover the speaking table in a moment. And obviously those comments are recorded and therefore will be in the public domain. We're not expecting a fire drill tonight, so if we get a fire alarm, we will be evacuating the building through the exits on that side and at that side. Could I please ask everyone now, if you've mobile phones, that they are switched off or at least to silent, please, so that we can keep moving. There are residence feedback forms. They are the orange forms on your chairs. In terms of speaking rights at tonight's meeting, they are as set out in the Council's Constitution, as summarised in the committee documentation, and as I will outline in a moment. Item 6 has a valid petition. A valid petition entitles the organiser of that petition or someone speaking on their behalf to a maximum of 5 minutes. And I understand that to be divided between a couple of people, and that's fine. You get 4 minutes green, 1 minute amber, and then when we get to the red, you're done. Committee members may ask anyone who addresses us additional questions. They may not. It depends if they want clarification. If you raise any new planning issues that have not come up before, I will take those forward at the end for you, not out of your speaking time. And for absolute clarity, those are the speaking rights. We don't run a debate afterwards. The rest of it is a meeting of this committee held in public and is for this committee to make its deliberations, which are based on the report and the officer presentation that you'll hear in a moment, together with their consideration of the petition item. There are no ward councillors planning to speak, and there will be no other speakers apart from the petitioner. To introduce you to tonight's committee, the voting members of committee tonight, I'll start down on my far right. I've got Councillor Stead, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Yarrow. Obviously, Councillor Higgins doesn't vote in respect of item 6 because he won't be here, but he does for the remainder of the meeting, and Councillor Edwards. And on my left, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Oswald, and Councillor Curling. Should there be a tied vote, very unusual, but should there be a tied vote, I have a casting vote. Other than that, I do not vote. The officer team tonight, Syed Shah, is dealing with highway matters for us. Joanne Hart is our presenting officer. James Roger, the head of planning, will provide me with advice as required. Kieran Grover from Democratic Services is our clerk, and Nicole Cameron is our legal advisor. That is all the preliminaries done. So we will now start, please, with item 6. Please, Joanna.
This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a single-storey young people's centre with double-height sports hall, car parking, replacement children's play equipment, landscaping, including enhancements to the remaining open space, and associated development at Ash Grove open space in Harefield. And I'll take committee through the plans that have been submitted. So you've just got the location plan there, which highlights the application sites. It's the whole area highlighted in red. Okay, I'll try and speak up. The constraints plan, so there's no constraints. The site has no formal designations. Another location plan. You've got the general arrangement plan, which shows the location of the building here. You've got new play equipment area provided up here, new amenity space here, and landscaping around the perimeter of the site. The garages here would be demolished and rebuilt. You've got pedestrian access along the northern access and new vehicular access from the southern access, with access to 8 car parking spaces, which would be for staff and visitors, disabled visitors only. That's the existing site plan. Proposed site plans, as I was saying, you've got the building up this end, and then you've got the car parking and a revised amenity area at this end of the site. You've got the floor plans, so you've got a sports hall at this end, which would be double-storey, then the rest of it is single-storey, with a studio at this end, office space, a general activities area, and toilets, and a kitchen. You've got the elevations, so as you can see, this is the elevation for the sports hall, the taller bit. You've got the studio at the back, and then the offices and the activities hall within the centre of the building. Just a couple of sections, and just an image, CGI, which gives an indication as to what the site layout would look like. The applicant has provided some overshadowing diagrams. I'll discuss those a bit further later, but they don't show any major issues with the site. You've got an aerial photograph there which shows the existing amenity area with a small children's playground towards the northeast end of the space. These are the existing garages which would be demolished and replaced. This is the access from the southern end of the site, which would become the new vehicular access. Then you've got some images of the existing open space itself. In terms of the principle of development, the site sits within the developed area as designated in the local plan. It does not fall within the green belt and has no formal open space designation. Accordingly, in considering the principle of the development, the key matter for discussion relates to the acceptability of the loss of the public amenity space in this location. Notably, because the site does not benefit from any formal designation, there is no requirement for the applicant to carry out a sequential test of appropriate sites, and the application must be assessed on its merits based on the information put forward. The Council's open space strategy confirms that it is not an area deficient in this type of open space. Furthermore, there is policy support for the provision of high-quality community facilities such as this. Given this, combined with the suggested need for development and the significant landscape enhancements which would be made to the remaining open space, no objections are raised to the principle of the development. In terms of impact on residential amenity, it should be noted that the maximum height of the building would be approximately 9 metres, which is to the ridge of the sports hall. This is comparable to that of a typical 2-storey house. In compliance with guidance within the Council's SPD and residential layouts, the building would be 15 metres from the nearest residential properties, which are located to the south. Accordingly, it complies with Council guidelines relating to prominence and overshadowing. With specific regard to daylight, it should be noted that overshadowing diagrams have been provided, and these demonstrate that no unacceptable loss of light would occur to surrounding properties. Although overshadowing would be greatest to the north of the building, given the distance of 23 metres between the building and the nearest property to the north, it is not considered that this would cause unacceptable loss of light. And notably, the proposals comply with guidance within BRE guidelines. It should also be noted that although given the single-storey nature of the building, no loss of privacy could occur from high-level windows, these would nevertheless be obscure glazed to reduce perceived overlooking. Numerous concerns have been raised by residents over the loss of the children's playground, loss of open space and impacts on wildlife. It should be noted that significant landscape enhancements are proposed to the remaining open space, which would include new play equipment, seating, amenity space, planting and ecological enhancements. It should also be noted that no floodlighting is proposed. In terms of traffic and parking, 8 car parking spaces for staff and disabled visitors would be provided on site. Although no formal drop-off and pick-up facility would be provided, evidence has been submitted to demonstrate that the traffic and parking demand from the development will be limited, such that it would not have a significant impact on the local highway network. I'd just like to draw members' attention to the committee addendum. Members are just asked to note substitution of a number of plans. This is solely just to amend the drawing numbers. There's no other amendments on the plans. A couple of additional plans have been provided, which are just for reasons of consistency. A 554 signature petition and 12 signature petition in objection have been received, in addition to 462 questionnaires and surveys, and various letters of additional letters of objection. No new issues are raised by these. One letter of support has been received. Members are asked to note amendments to condition 19, just to ensure that the external fire doors are secured so that they don't allow noise outbreak. And there's just a typing error in page 20, which members are asked to note. The reasons summarised, it is recommended that approval should be granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. We will move to the petition. Ms. Lisa Wicker, and I understand Richard Barnes is speaking on your behalf or with you. The button on the middle of that microphone, it will make it live, and we will begin the timers.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing both of us to speak under the rules. I note Councillor Higgins has had to withdraw because of declared interest in this matter, and I wonder if any other members of the majority party have the same problem, given the publicity which the Hillingdon People has done, which is the council's own paper, and other statements which have been made in public regarding this issue. However, I let that rest because it could be grounds for review afterwards. Can I thank the officer for outlining the plans for this particular piece of Greenland open space? It was open space left when the Ashgrove was completed and built, and the only photograph that really captured where the site was the one which was an aerial shot showing that it is utterly and totally surrounded by houses. It is an amenity space which has been used by the local residents, and it is particularly important to them as open space because Ashgrove is a highly dense development, and this is a particularly important area for children. The traffic survey was conducted during the day, during the week. It does not reflect the traffic levels that are there. Indeed, we have photographs of a normal and proper day which are available to the committee. And similarly, the access and egress points to it are not wide enough for a lorry to go down, for one, to facilitate the building, and to ensure adequate use of the space, the building afterwards. 8 spaces for a building which is projected to have 150 attendees is clearly inadequate, particularly as we will require at least 8 members of staff to be there, and it is also supposed to accommodate the disabled. 8 is wholly inadequate. Ashgrove itself is fully parked, particularly given that the plans are that this shall be used on a Saturday night, a Friday night, and during the day. There are no projections of what use it will be put to, but I would guess to make it worthwhile, it needs a large number of people to attend. The development itself is oversized for the site. It is overdevelopment. It impinges on absolutely everybody who lives around there. As I said, access is poor to non-existent, and parking is wholly inadequate. It impinges on everyone who lives in Ashgrove. None of us are against the establishment of a youth centre, call it what one will, within Harefield. Indeed, many people have campaigned for one in Harefield for some considerable time. But it is the view of the people of Harefield. The church has written to you, the vicar, the Residents Association has written to you. There's a substantial petition to you that the residents of Harefield, in all their guises and forms, are against the development at this particular site. The only people who seem to be in favour of it are those who do not live in the village and have no particular attachment to it. And indeed, if one looks around the committee today, there is no one here from Harefield exercising a vote or speaking on either side of the committee. We would ask you to vote this down as it is a substantial application. We would ask you to listen to the people of Harefield, work with the people of Harefield, do with us, not to us, and establish a youth centre where it belongs. The planning permission for the academy, when it was granted, included provision for community use and community development, particularly with regards to children. That has never been applied and has never been enforced. There is an immediate alternative which could be used until a proper site can be identified and used, which meets the planning requirements. Thank you, Chairman.
Did you have some bits to add to that?
Okay. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the residents. We was informed that this was a done deal. We've received absolutely no support or guidance from our councillors. We'd like you to please consider when making a decision there is no other such existing youth centre in such close proximity to houses, to a large number of houses that have been built in the last 20 years. Please consider how much of the impact this will have on the residents of Ash Grove. The plans we feel are not correct, they're flawed. The asset of community has been lost. There's a loss of safe amenity which will no longer be able to use because there's going to be cars and HGVs going through it. The road's width is far too narrow and the parking is already exasperated. And it's too big for the space, and there's no respite for the residents, as this will go on 6.5 days per week, 52 weeks of the year, and we only got 30-foot gardens backing onto this to protect us. Thank you. I'll try to go quick.
It's all right. I did allow a little time over the top there, given the size of the petition. There's quite a number of points. I'm just going to pick one out, because I think most of the others, we might have expected. You queried the plans a moment ago in your. Can you just amplify that for me a little bit?
The reason why I'm querying the plans is because when you actually look at this across here, it actually goes straight across, and there's a lady there with a pink top, and that exit is actually going across the top of our house. We've actually measured this out, so the entrances are just slightly further that way.
Don't point to it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just show us. I just want to
This is where the garages are.
Yeah.
Actually goes kind of straight across, so it actually comes to here. Where this has been put, it actually goes across this lady's house just here.
That's all right. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were querying.
And also, sorry, the actual turning access, there's not enough room for they're saying they've got a turning point there. There's not enough room for an emergency vehicle to get around that.
Do any other members of the committee have any questions? Sorry, I didn't turn my mic on. Nope. I think you're good. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Who wants to start me off? Down all round. Councillor Curtin, go on.
Okay, I'll start
Yeah,
off.
well, somebody's got it.
I have considerable concerns with regard to this. This is a small area of recreational ground in a...
That's a point I ought to have made before you started. Sorry, my fault. Just for the benefit of members of the public, the committee did carry out a site visit last Friday. So a number, not everyone was there, but a number of members of the committee have actually seen this on the ground. So just for clarity.
Thank you. This is a small recreational area in a highly densely populated area, and there are lots of parallels with other similar sites that have since been developed. I've been desperately trying to look through a few appeal decisions because one of the inspectors on one of the similar sites in Hayes came up with a fantastic line that I wanted to quote. I can't find it. But it was basically along the lines of these are some of the gems in our town centres. And well, I mean, words fail me that it is actually the council proposing to build on this piece of land. We need good recreational facilities as well as everything else. And another parallel that I can't help drawing is that with the Grange Centre in Charville. For many years, there was the Grange Centre, which was a mixture of youth and community centre, and it was demolished, and a local campaign that we fought, and it was a cross-party campaign because at one point Councillor Mary O'Connor was fighting with us to have the Grange Centre rebuilt. The council at the time, which is only a few years ago, suggested that for a youth centre to be placed there, it was too much of a residential area. And so the youth centre was built at another location, and a community facility, a community centre was built in its place at the wishes of the residents. I mean, it strikes me that this is, well, it's within policy, but only just. I mean, it looks like we've shoehorned something in here. Looking at the plans, the building is in the smallest area of the plot. Granted, if it was in the other area of the plot, you'd be losing even more recreational land. So I think that in itself sort of spells out that this is the wrong place for this facility. I've seen photographs from one of the petitioners about the traffic generation, and the traffic is appalling there, and 8 parking spaces for this facility. I think that's really beyond the wit of anybody to think that 8 parking spaces is actually going to be any use whatsoever in this location. So all in all, I've got lots of reservations and lots of concerns, and I don't feel I will be supporting this tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Curley. Do I have any other views, Councillor Edwards?
I understand the concerns that have been put forward, and particularly those put forward by the petitioners. To lose any piece of community space is something that a decision we should not take lightly. What I am bound to do here is set aside the argument of whether or not there are other alternative areas. That is not a consideration for this planning committee. I understand my duty to be to consider the application before me for the site before me, and whether or not, in planning terms, the application fits. Now, I've looked at the policies and I have reflected on them, but the benefit that's to be gained here of the community youth facility, which I understand and was mentioned in the petition has been campaigned for some time, will be of great value. And therefore, I am persuaded that the building of this youth centre on this open space is on balance within policy and acceptable. I still have some questions on detail that I would like to come to, but from a starting point, I am not one for saying this is out of touch right from the beginning, in that it doesn't meet the first threshold challenge of whether or not there is a need here, and whether the need for this community space balances the loss of the valued community space, recreational area. I'll pause at that point, but I would like to come back to a couple of details, if I may. Thank you.
Anybody else want to come in? Oh, I've got 2 hands. I like this now. I'll go Councillor Duncan and then Councillor Yarra.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the site visit last Friday. I found it very helpful, and it was. It's always better to see these things on site. I was very concerned when I heard that the building is exactly 21 metres from a property at one point. I take that to be number 28 Ash Grove it isn't actually marked on here. The only dimension marked is 23.217 to 26, but the distance to 28 is less, so I assume that's where it's 21 metres, and as we've already heard, 15 metres. So this is absolutely shoehorned in. You're going to have really very fine setting out to meet those requirements. I don't think this is the kind of space on which you should be shoehorning in this kind of development. This is amenity land, it's amenity open space, and what will happen is there will be no amenity left for the people surrounding this site, because if it's well used, and obviously we would all hope that it would be very well used, this is going to be a facility for young people. It's going to be built at public expense. We want it to meet the needs of a whole range of young people of all ages and abilities. And so if it is successful, which we want it to be, it's going to cause noise, it's going to cause disturbance, and it will be, I have to say, I think, a very unneighbourly use for so many houses in such close proximity. I was very concerned about noise when I saw the site and saw the dimensions, and that's why I did ask about those, and they were given. You will have doors and windows that will be open during hot weather. People will be playing games, they'll be involved in activities, young people, they'll be chasing around, they'll get hot, and it's no good saying that we will have no doors or windows opening. I'm afraid human beings, when they get very hot and there's a door or a window to open, will open it. And that's just simply a fact, and we can condition that as much as we like, but we are not going to be there to police this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I'm afraid. And I think there will be noise, and I think that's unacceptable. Also, I didn't like the idea, when I looked through the conditions, that the windows would be non-opening, and I think this may be contrary to how we would design a building like this. If you've got a lot of young people doing various activities, in the event of fire, its means of escape is often achieved through window openings, not just doors. And looking at the plans, I don't know if this is the case, but the area that's shown as admin has store at one end, and it just has a door into the main activities hall. So if there was a fire in that area, I don't know if that would meet safety requirements. And so I would be concerned about that. We don't have a policy for building on open space. I know we have allowed schools in the green belt because of the pressure on schools, but not on small pieces of land like this. It so happened that when we went on the site visit, there was actually a lady sitting on the bench, and I went and sat down to just look at my plans, and she said, I said, this is a nice area. She said, yes, I come here to have my lunch. She said, it's a very peaceful area, and she was just finishing having her lunch. So that was someone who worked in the area and came there and used it just to have her lunch. So quite apart from the children's play area, it's obviously an area that's appreciated by other residents and people who work in the area. I support the statements that have been made about car parking. We only had to see the photographs that were forwarded to us today, particularly this one involving emergency vehicles, to feel extremely concerned about the parking arrangements. And it does need more car parking, but again, is this the kind of place where you want to bring in more cars? No, it isn't. You want a larger site, more open space around it, and the ability to provide more disabled parking and servicing generally. So I'm afraid that I do have a number of concerns about it. They're planning concerns, and I don't feel that I would be able to support the proposals as they stand at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Gower, I have you held as next.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I too visited the site along with Councillor Duncan, and whilst what she says is perfectly true, and I think we shared some of the same worries about what we're putting there, I don't quite come to the same conclusions that you have, Janet. One of the things we have to, I think, come to a decision on, which is car parking. Now, the car parking, as I see it on this site, is for staff only. There isn't any car parking for the people who are going to be visiting the site, because it is for the young people of Harefield, not for the young people of Ruislip, Northwood. It's for the young people of Harefield. And they are expected to arrive from a local position. In other words, there are 20 bicycle stands, there are some moped stands. They're not expected to drive up in their cars. Now, if that is the premise upon which we have decided to build it, I need a statement from the officers to say that's why it is as it is. We are not providing car parking spaces for young people to come to this place. They will actually walk, and if they walk, it'll do them good. So I come from a slightly different angle. It's not that there isn't enough car parking spaces. It wasn't designed to have 40 car parking spaces so that there could be 40 cars being parked, bringing students to the place. I don't share your concerns that it's going to remove the facility from people who want to have their lunch there. They'll still be able to have their lunch. There is still going to be a park. There will still be a seat where people can sit down. There was only one person there. Certainly there will be a space and a place where a person could have a lunch. I think there's an awful lot of hype going on about this. And I'd also like to say that this isn't the first youth centre we've built in the borough. We've built many. And one of them is built right in the middle of a residential area in Hallowell Road. And there has been no problems with it at all. So we shouldn't just automatically think noise, problems and everything else. You have to design those things out, and no doubt as we move on into the evening we'll find out what we're doing in order to quell the noise and to ensure that the residents' life is not made a misery. I don't personally believe it will be made a misery. However, you're quite right. Please. You're quite right to say it looks like it's been shoehorned in. But that's how we put our shoes on. And when you've shoehorned it in, it's a fit. And let's not say that your heels are still sticking out of the shoe. It's a good building. It looks as though it will provide a service which is needed. And I think we all have to get used to it. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to ask the Head of Planning perhaps to comment on the parking issue for the minute, because that, I think, will take one issue forward.
Perhaps if I comment on the parking, and also there was points raised regarding issues if there was a fire in the building. Yeah, you did, yeah. So page 37 of the committee report, there's a key paragraph. It's the third one down under section 7.10, and basically the position being taken on this application, and I'll read it out. The transport statement contends that a high proportion of young people will travel on foot or by bicycle, as is the trend at other youth centres in the borough. The site is within walking distance of a sizable residential area, Harefield Junior School, Harefield Academy and bus stops along Northwood Road. Taking this into consideration, in addition to trends seen at similar sites elsewhere in the borough, it is accepted that the centre is unlikely to generate a high volume of traffic, which would have a significant impact on the local highway network. So just to explain that further, so we're not expecting you'd have 150 children attending with 150 vehicles. I don't think equally we're assuming that everybody is going to attend on bicycle or on foot, but the opinion of officers is that there would not be so many vehicles visiting the site that there'd be an adverse impact on the capacity of the highway network. We are aware from surveys that in terms of the surrounding area that there is some additional parking capacity, and we think that taking that into account, there isn't sufficient grounds to refuse a planning application on parking or highway grounds. With regards to the fire safety issues, I think in a minute Saeed can perhaps clarify the technical stuff to do with fire engines, but with regard to the design of the building and the issue of windows and doors, that's a building control issue. That wouldn't be for the planning committee.
Okay.
And I think perhaps, because I know it's been discussed a lot, when the application was first lodged, the building didn't fully satisfy the 15 and 21 metre distances. At that point, I think you could have criticised the scheme. But as it stands, officers are confident that the 15 and 21 metres are met, therefore it is acceptable in principle in terms of the impact on neighbouring property. It may be tight, but it is acceptable in principle.
Okay. That provides some explanation around parking and windows. Saib, would you just comment on the fire safety and access for fire engines, because I think that's quite relevant.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. When looking at the access for fire engines, we look at two things. Either they're able to enter the site, or they're able to access the fire hose. The distance is about 40 metres. In this case, it meets both, albeit the fact that I recognise that if the fire engine were to turn in the site, it will have to rely on no parking on the opposite side of the access point. But the building is also within 40 metres, so the fire hose can attend. So in my professional opinion, from a fire engine point of view, we cannot recommend refusal on this application.
Thank you. That's right. Councillor Edwards,
Could I
Yeah, come on. Yeah.
make one observation firstly on the parking, which was the petitioners mentioned 8 members of staff, whereas the report sets out 5 at maximum, and that is the figure that is in my mind. Therefore, for me, 8 parking spaces for staff and any disabled attendee seems reasonable when 5 of the staff. I would like to ask the question around the 40-metre distance. The furthest corner, the bottom right-hand corner of that building, if the fire was in that back corner room, is that within the 40 metres of the highway? Can the hose get to that corner of the building? It may well get to the front, but can it get to the back corner?
Right.
I'll have to measure it to answer you exactly, but obviously we have the north access and the south access. The hose can get from either side. Yep.
So you still believe that?
I think we still believe, and I think the main point here is that the fire engine can still access. That's what the swept paths are showing us, so we can't ignore them. Yeah.
I've got no other hands on this one. Councillor, I'll come back to. Did you have some elements of detail you wanted to ask questions on?
The assertion there is helpful. If it can be measured, I would like it to be measured. I'd like assurance that that back corner is within a hose length of a fire engine stationed on the road because they can't get out. I'm sorry, I do need that.
The items, because I was holding some detail from you before, because I think I'm about to work back round now, so I'll...
Yes,
Yep.
While we're on the traffic and access point.
Let's start off with whatever we've got and let's get all the bits out.
This is on the south side. My question would be regarding the condition that's on page... It's condition 17, I think, whatever it is.
17, I think you'll find.
Is that sufficiently strong should the householder decide to put up a fence alongside that access point at any stage after the building has commenced or is in occupation? Thank you.
I'll first. I'm really honest. Right, go on.
I'm going to go that way up the table, but I didn't want to
upset the world.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just a question. I know that because of that this site hasn't got any designations, that other sites do not have to be sought. But bearing in mind that this is an application from the council, and the council prides itself in putting residents first, could I ask were any other sites looked at all?
I will ask the planners where they are aware. Of course, they may not necessarily be aware, because obviously they are considering the application before them, would not necessarily know the process that went on, but the head of planning may be able to offer some guidance to us.
The involvement of the local planning authorities, so perhaps I speak for me and Joe and the officers, has solely been to with regard to this site, we have not been involved in any site selection process.
But then that's not unusual, because that would have gone on elsewhere, or it may have gone on elsewhere. Councillor Duncan, sorry.
Thank you very much, Chair. On the issue of parking, yes, I'm sure we'd love to think that all the children and young people in Harefield will be jogging, walking to the site. We know that's not going to happen, I'm afraid, David. And in fact, if we look at the information on page 30, where it talks about trip generation, we know that a considerable number of parents will take their children there. I'm also thinking of disabled children. This is a new facility. We would want them to be encouraged to go there, and parents taking their disabled child may well wait there and help them with various aspects of using the site. So I do think we need more car parking for those reasons. I think that on page 31, National Planning Policy Framework, and this is the government's view, this isn't just Hillingdon's, we are meant to respect the government's policy and translate it into more detail, says, existing open space, sports and recreational buildings and land, including playing fields, should not be built on unless an assessment has been undertaken which clearly shows the open space, buildings or land to be surplus to requirements. That clearly is not the case.
Or I can read on as well.
Yes, or the loss resulting would be replaced by equivalent or better provision in terms of quantity and quality. Well, it isn't. We are hearing that it's not being an open area, it's being replaced with built form. And that isn't there before. If there had been an old pavilion on the site and it was, falling down and really needed to be modernised and brought into the 21st century, that's a different matter. This doesn't give you a licence to build all over open space. I'm certain that that's not the government's intention if it was. But another point that concerns me is drainage. We are building on an area where it's now going to be covered with much more hard surface. Now, I can tell you that I've had 2 petitions in my ward in West Drayton where people have been denied access to park off the road, off busy roads, which are bus routes and commercial vehicles passing through, and accidents and taking place every day, and damage to vehicles, because it's crossing a small strip of amenity land, grassed area, and this is needed to soak up water. So what are we doing here? It's not just a grass strip we're talking about, it's a huge area that we're taking. So we're applying double standards here, I'm afraid, in the borough for all kinds of reasons about other things. We need to sort out our planning policies on what we're doing where. And if we're able to put in more built development, what is that going to do in terms of drainage? What is that going to do in terms of soaking up water in periods of excess rainfall? So it's another point that I raise. Thank you.
Picking up drainage, obviously condition 11 covers sustainable water management in quite some detail. Do we have any known drainage issues on this site?
No, the site does not fall within a floodplain, and there's no known critical drainage issues. So officers consider that the standard condition would cover those matters.
Could I just come back and say, yes, just say thank you, and I thank you for that advice. Where my residents are trying to get access to their properties, the safe storage of their vehicles, they're not in floodplains either, but I'm told that this is council-wide policy on all land.
Well, I can't get into specifics of something in West Drayton, but sorry, Councillor Morgan, I spotted your hand as I was looking down.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've got a question for the officers. It's concerning the refuse collection. If that road is tight for the fire brigade, surely it's going to be even tighter for a refuse lorry to go down.
Refuse lorries get there at the moment, but I will ask. Well, yeah, but they will go be...
My response is exactly the same. The refuse lorries already serve this state, so it will be not any different for this facility. The refuse vehicle will come and arrive, collected from the highway, as they do right now for other premises.
And it will be a daytime collection anyway?
It will be daytime collection.
Councillor Evans?
It is developing further the waste development, and this is the comment of the waste development manager, and this could be down to my inability to read the detail of the plan. The consultation says the collector should not have to cart a bulk bin more than 10 metres from the point of storage to the collection vehicle. Assuming the collection vehicle is going to be in Ash Grove, does the design here of the refuse store meet that issue? That's page 31.
Or have we got an alternative? How close are we?
Yeah, I mean, the refuse, that's in a scenario where we have a refuse store, if you like, a structure where refuse is left and for collectors to come and pick it up from there. A lot of developments these days, we agree plans whereby there's a management arrangement for somebody to bring out the bins onto the highway or close to the highway so that they can be collected, and I can see that's probably will be the way on this one as well.
Do I sense the waste management plan coming then?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll recommend it should be conditioned waste management plan, but all I'm trying to say is for all intents and purposes, the waste will only be collected if they're left close to the highway, and I would accept...
So you believe it can be achieved?
Yeah.
Is what you're saying? Yeah. Okay, that's why I want to clarify. I still have got fire safety held as, fire hoses held as a question about how far we think they can reach. Where are we on that one?
I need to go and get a skilled ruler on the
Well, do we
answer.
believe, let me ask it, can I put the question another way? And I'm not trying to duck it, but can I put the question another way to you? Do you believe that on the plans before you that those distances can be met? Yeah. I can ask for it to be checked afterwards and conditioned afterwards if this is subsequently approved. But I mean, I want to sort of kind of on balance at the minute. Do you believe that it looks okay?
If I can help, sorry, no, even if you couldn't reach the 40 metres, there's been schemes where they've catered for that through inserting fire hydrants and other means. Yep. So, in effect, there are two ways, I think, of you dealing with this as a committee, because it's not going to end up as a refusal matter. It's either a case that you sort of take it on face value, or alternatively you ask officers to investigate before a planning decision is issued, because I clarify what committee is doing tonight is you're deciding whether the application should be approved, but technically there's a later stage when the officers actually issue a decision that you could ask that before a decision is issued that either the point is clarified or an appropriate condition is added if necessary to ensure one way or another the fire issues are addressed. But that is something that could be agreed to the chairman and Labour lead, because if you'd asked me the question, is this something that we're going to go through discussion to a point where there's refusal, it simply is not. I mean, there are issues as a committee that you can reach a decision on, such as on parking, whether you're happy to approve or refuse the application, but this particular point is not going to end up as a refusal reason for a planning application.
Okay.
Chairman, if I may, this wasn't me looking for a refusal.
No.
This is straightforward safety issue. The room we're talking about is the kitchen, which is the one most likely to catch fire, and therefore is that the one that they get the host to?
I think I will. If I'm going to pull this together now, because the sense I have of this is there are a number of people who are not comfortable. There are a number of other people who appear comfortable, and I don't suppose another hour of debate will move those views in either direction. I'm not sensing they're that movable tonight, unless I'm wrong. I'm normally fairly good at this. I sense that the matters regarding waste collection and fire safety could be dealt with outside if members were happy with the rest of it. They are matters of detail. There are ways around it, and we've all seen enough of these schemes to know it can be achieved. So can I just park those two for a second? The sense I have of this, obviously parking is one issue. We've had alternative views. Some people are comfortable that the parking provision is adequate, others are uncomfortable, and you'll have to come to your own decisions on that. In terms of, Councillor Yarrow used a lovely phrase, I will pick up on it, just because it works well for me tonight. He said, the shoehorn, yes, you shoehorn your feet into a shoe, but they fit. This does fit. It may only be just, but it does meet current standards on all the plans we've got and all the evidence we've got. There isn't a requirement. It may be nice on occasions, but there isn't a requirement to more than meet standards. So it does meet standards in terms of that. There is obviously residents have a view as to whether this is the right location or not. In terms of this committee's decision, they have to look at the site that is before them and does this meet current planning policy. Councillor Duncan has drawn attention to various aspects of national planning policy, but there are, yes, ways of interpreting in the sense that this is the provision of a new community facility within this site. So again, some people will take one view and other people may take another. So I'm going to ask if somebody would give me a proposal to take this forward. I am going to suggest that, for a moment, that if this does go through, that we will ask for planning officers to provide conditions around both the fire safety and the waste management outside, and we'll agree the technical wording of those outside, because I think we do need to bottom those out, but I think they are, I've heard enough to believe they are bottom, you will get to the bottom and they would not overturn any other decision. That's not presupposing what the decision is, but they wouldn't be matters that would tend to change it at this stage. Someone give me a proposal to take it forward. Councillor Edwards, please.
Mr Chairman, this is a difficult one, and it is one of balance. Undoubtedly, this is a valued piece of community land, and we've heard passionate argument put up by residents, and I absolutely understand where they're coming from. But at the same time, I've also heard and have been reported in here the need for adequate youth provision in the area. What we have here is a scheme that just fits, but complies with all of our policies. And for that reason, I propose that we go with the officer's recommendation and agree this, but subject to the fire safety issue being picked up, the waste management being picked up, and the sight line stroke speed table issue also being picked up. I'm satisfied that they can all be dealt with by way of condition rather than refusal. Thank you.
Chair, sorry, could I just, before we go to the vote, could I just add that if the committee is minded to approve that also one of the, along with the refuse and the emergency vehicles and stuff, the issue that the petitioner raised about the access road being over somebody's house, could that also be double checked as well?
I think. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yes, no, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Curling. In the long debate, I had overlooked that. So yes, I'm certain we can. Those are normally. Sorry, no, I can't. I really can't, because otherwise it becomes a two-way flow. Okay, I have a proposal on the table that has been duly seconded, that we accept the officer recommendation subject to now 3 matters, which have been detailed. All those in favour, please clearly show. I have 4. All those against, 3. 4 to 3, it goes through. Thank you all. Okay, we'll wait for Councillor Higgins to return and join us. Okay, thank you. I will now move to the second item of the night, which is item 7, Kingsway House, Horton Road, Useley. Joanna, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This application... Sorry, let me just put it onto the correct plan.
Correct plan will be good.
This application seeks outline planning permission for the erection of a Part 4, Part 5 storey block of 34 new residential units with associated parking and amenity space, including the demolition of the existing buildings on site at Kingsway House in Useley. Details of access and scale only to be determined at this stage, with all other matters reserved for subsequent approval. I'll just take committee through the plans. So you've got the site area there. There's no specific designations relating to the site which would preclude development. You've got outline proposals which show access would be off Horton Road via an existing access which already serves the adjoining blocks of flats. You've got an outline proposal which shows car parking and the layout of the development. It just shows the roof plan as opposed to a floor plan. You've got a couple of drawings which show swept paths. And then you've got the aerial photos. So the sites adjacent, this one, and this one, I understand they have been pretty much completed, if not occupied by now. This is a view down the access road. The application site is this site at the back, comprising the white building. This is the view to the south of the building. That's the canal towpath at the top with the trees along it. This is looking up north towards Horton Road. Just a few images of the building itself. And this is the key access route, which, as you can see, is existing and already serves the surrounding properties. As already mentioned, the site does not fall within a designated industrial and business area, and in this instance, it is not considered that it would lead to an unacceptable loss of employment land. Furthermore, it would comply with current planning policies which seek to encourage additional housing. Accordingly, no objections are raised to the principle of the development. Subject to detailed design at reserved matters stage, no objections are raised to the overall scale and height of the proposed building, which would be in keeping with that of adjoining developments. In terms of impact on residential amenity, it is not considered that it would have any adverse impact on neighbouring properties, and furthermore, subject to detailed design, it's considered that it could provide an acceptable living environment for future occupants. In terms of traffic and parking, 35 car parking spaces would be provided, and full details of these would be required by condition. I just draw members' attention to the committee addendum sheet. We're just proposing that the secure by design condition is added and an extra criteria added to the contamination condition just to ensure that contaminated soils are covered. For these reasons, approval is recommended. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to start this one off. This is, even by the standards of an outline application, very outline. With very, very, very little information upon which to judge it, which gives me concerns. I'm going to ask officers for a couple of pieces of clarification because I can't be certain in my own mind. Does this meet all of the council's required standards? And I'm particularly looking at access in terms of highways and swept paths and the like, and in terms of amenity space as two to start with. Do we believe that it does? And I know the conservation officer also has some issues with the site close to the canal, but can I start with those two, please?
Well, I will try and cover all the points that I think are required to sort of make commissioners slightly more comfortable on this scheme. In terms of internal amenity space standards, we have a footprint for the building. We know how many stories it is, so it is possible. And we also we also have a kind of ground floor layout that gives an idea of the size of some apartments. I'm completely comfortable that you'd be able to get a mix of 1, 2, possibly even 3 bed flats in this building quite comfortably. I do not think for 1 minute you're approving a building that's going to result in 35 studio flats or anything that might cause you concern in terms of, how shall I put it, cramming 2 smaller units in the building, because I think the footprint's quite comfortable in that regard. What I would say on the external amenity space, though, is my simple view is that in terms of usable amenity space, you're going to need some form of combination of external amenity space, roof gardens and balconies, some form of combination. So you're going to need something that isn't just the space around the building, that relies on part of the design of the building to provide an adequate amount of external amenity space. Now, I don't think that's a problem with you approving this application. What it means is my recommendation is you would have some form of informative that is worded to protect the council's position should the applicant seek to argue that in approving the outline that they thought we were assuming that the external amenity space would be satisfied without having to do any form of balconies or roof gardens. And I'm comfortable you could word appropriately and informative that guides the applicant, and basically, because it's on the decision notice, it just sets out the council's position that we want to be comfortable there's appropriate external amenity space, so we feel that there needs to be a combination, as I say, of external amenity space, roof garden, balconies. I'm comfortable that we've got a large enough site that we can get acceptable external and internal amenity space, but as I say, I think we need informative to protect our position on the external. I would also add that, whereas I take on board the point made about the level of information submitted, it is a valid application, and part of the intention of outline applications is that the applicant's right to not completely design a building but get the principle agreed. On the point of the refuse turning, this is something myself and Said have discussed in detail prior to this meeting and since the committee report was agreed. This is, if anything, even more complicated, my response from the first point, I'm afraid. Buildings A, B and C, are the applicant has the freehold for those. The relevance of this is if a refuse vehicle, even if it was a matter of very small centimetres, needed to slightly oversail onto highways within within the boundaries of A, B and C, it's within the applicant's ownership. Furthermore, as Joe mentions, these have a consent, these have been built out. The view of myself and Said is that the refuse turning is too tight, that in reality there'll be very marginal oversail into the freehold area. We think you could ask for a revised swept path analysis that would not result in any loss of parking spaces or anything that would affect the scheme before you, but would again protect the council's position, because we think there's further phases to come, and those councillors that know the geography of this area will probably completely understand what I mean by that, because effectively various industrial buildings have been picked off slowly here, and there's a couple more left that I think anybody taking a pragmatic view would anticipate that they're going to be subject to future applications. We don't have such applications before us, but it's quite clear what is happening in this part of usually. So it's not that the plan is necessarily unacceptable that's before you, but what I would like is delegated authority to get a revised swept path analysis that is the final plan. What I would also add is, and this is where it gets slightly confusing, myself and Said have seen a different swept path analysis that came in with the application of buildings A, B and C that completely convinces us this can work, but as I say, it's slightly different from the one before you on this plan.
Okay.
And I'll I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you for those clarifications. I would comment at this stage and for the minute that obviously the commentary around external amenity space does differ from the officer report on page 69, section 709, which actually says it works. So clearly that isn't the case on the current plan. So I think there are two decisions for committee at this point. Clearly this is an area we do know and where we have agreed housing on other similar sites not that far away. In fact, 2 or 3 of them have been before us quite recently. I think the decision before us tonight is relatively straightforward. We've got very little to go on. Is the principle acceptable, and do we believe we have enough details, subject to the reservations the head of planning has just given us, to do it? Or do we say, before we even agree this outline, we'd like to see a bit more, and therefore we send it back for a bit more? So, yes. So the conservation officer's view.
Sorry, I probably should also. I have to be honest. I don't agree with the conservation officer's view. The conservation officer implies concern of a 5-storey building at this location, and when you bear in mind other developments allowed in the centre of usually, it's just isn't a view I can agree with. There are numerous permissions for buildings of commensurate size in that immediate area that have been granted.
I've got hands all over the place here, so I'm going to go left then right to just vary it a little tonight. Councillor Oswald, you were, and then I've got Councillor Edwards and Councillor Higgins, followed by Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much, Chairman. If we haven't got the detail that we need, why should we approve these plans? Because we've already heard that this involves buildings A, B and C, and there can be some adjustments made there if access isn't correct. Why submit a set of plans like this that aren't correct, we'll say? Why don't we just send it back? Why don't we just refuse it and ask for a proper set of plans with more detail?
Yeah, my one option certainly open to committee tonight is to defer this item for further details to come in, and if that's the view, we'll go with it.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. While I'm speaking, then I'll move deferment. Okay.
Let me just check what others are going to come up with. I don't. That may be a common view in a minute.
I wouldn't wish to take anything away from what Councillor Oswald said there. The issue that I have is, and it does relate to some degree to the design, and I know that is a reserved matter, but what we're giving here is outline planning permission for 34 blocks, and that may begin to shape the frontage of the building onto the canal side. I'm concerned that we may wish not to have a canyoning type effect down there with high 4 or 5 storey buildings right on adjacent to the water's edge, and once we start setting back upper floors, that might decrease the number of flats available.
The only commentary I would draw, and I know the head of planning will do it if I don't, is that if we remember the other sites along the canal and certainly going over the other side, there are some sizeable buildings have already been agreed by us and by the inspector.
Absolutely, but they are immediately adjacent to the road network. This is further round the corner, and at some point you have to say we begin to step down now into a more
no, I just wanted to...
This may be the transition
point. Put the balance on the table. Councillor Higgins?
Well, I concur with both Councillor Oswald and Councillor Edwards. The lack of detail is
giving you a problem.
Is giving me a real problem, and this is a very developed area with Crossrail and everything, and I think it's huge opportunity, and it's also huge, obviously, to be abused. And I just think that we should, as a committee, get it right.
Councillor Morgan, are you about to differ with that, or are you about to go along the same path?
I'm afraid not, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be agreeing with them. This is an outline of an outline. I don't think we can judge on this.
Okay. I think I've probably heard enough. Councillor Duncan, are you going to go in a different direction, or are you comfortable?
Just 1 or 2 things that I was concerned about, Chair. The distance between buildings, and I assume that the 5-storey building and building B, which is now residential, is going to be 21 or 24 metres, thereabouts. It doesn't appear to be...
for that to be noted so that can be checked.
But between the 4 storeys and Big Mill House Works, obviously it's a much less distance. You couldn't have windows to habitable rooms there. So immediately you have a constraint. You could only have windows to the north and south. And on the 5-storey element, presumably you're going to have some windows on the western flank. So immediately you're starting to build up a pattern of constraints. And I agree with Councillor Edwards that once you start to fit the detailed arrangements for the flats into that, it may be that you're not able to achieve that. There are other things that I'm concerned about. Health provision doesn't seem to have been addressed at all. Whether that's now taken care of in SIL, I don't know. Also, the opportunity for treatment of the canal, when this is something that we've raised on all other sites coming onto the canal, and has been quite a point issue. To abandon that now would seem, inconsistent. So I'm concerned about the relationship to other buildings on the adjoining sites and how that impacts on what we can do on this site. And finally, I have to say, as a committee, we approve plans. These plans are not approvable. We cannot approve them. That's the position. I'm very old-fashioned about things like that, I'm afraid. It may be possible to amend them to be in a position where we can approve them. But at the moment, I'm sorry, they are not in that
Okay, I take the strong view. Councillor Stead, are you going to add to that, or are you going to...
No,
I want to move this.
I believe it's already on the table as a proposal.
It is a proposal. I have a seconder, and I'm about to put it to a vote.
Oh, there's got to be a seconder, but if you've got
Right.
one already...
I've proposed a second. This item is deferred for effectively further information and improved plans, which will address, no doubt, some of the concerns that have been raised.
I do appreciate more balconies, particularly with a lovely view of
Well, that may be where some of the amenity space comes from, but let's see what we get. All those in favour of deferral, please clearly show. Is that unanimous? Yes, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. 7:14, we